Hello, this is MBA Bites, a series about things you learn in business school and things you don't. I am Vin Bittencourt, and today I want to share with you the secrets of great communication at work. How can communication help you build better relationships? And why is it so hard to master communication that informs, connects, and persuades? Let us start with some facts and figures about communication. Communication is comprised of the four following elements. 48% of the time we spend at work, in average, in communication activities, we spend listening. So 48% of the time listening, 27% of the time speaking, 16% of the time reading, and only 9% of the time writing. At the same time, communication is about exchanging information. So how do we absorb information? Well, 7% of the information that comes through our brains, we capture it through words. 7% through words, 38% from sounds, and 55% from visuals. So from the get-go, you get to see why a lot of people fail in communication. Just think about it. If we spend an average 48% of the time listening, whenever you're listening to someone and you're not paying attention, maybe just thinking about your next remark and how to jump into the conversation, you're missing on a great opportunity to absorb, critical things that are being said. At the same time, in a meeting, if you spend most of the time taking notes instead of paying attention and just looking at body language and signs and tones, you're missing out on 50% of the visual cues, right? They are being communicated, and all the stuff that's not being said. So essentially, silence and body language, always say a lot. The fact is, most people don't pay attention to them and just, they stay oblivious to it. So that's a huge no-no and a huge mistake. Communication is comprised of a lot of body language and silence, and most of the time, people are kind of they're just kind of clueless to that. So that's why people fail communication, because they don't pay attention. So a few factors about communication. Communication happens all the time. Whether you're doing it consciously or not, whenever you are in an open environment where people can see you, you're communicating. Your gestures, your body language, your facial expressions, all these things are always sending a message. Communication is an act of creation. Although sometimes not visible or evident, communication always has a result, a consequence, an outcome. If there's one factor for which we do have control, is how we communicate with the world. We can always adopt a posture of positivity, empathy, respect, kindness, directness, clarity, or not. But if we choose to adopt a posture of negativity about, in communication, then there will be consequences. Our ideas won't trigger any action, our words won't persuade anyone, and pretty much everything we try to do will fail, because we won't be able to communicate and connect with people. So positivity and kindness and empathy and respect and communicating in a positive, reinforcing way, it's always the way to go. When you want to improve your relationship with somebody, the first thing you do is listen more. That's the quickest way to learn more about the situation, to learn more about the person, but also the best way to bond. When you listen, there's the perception on the other person's side that you care, that you respect them, and that's a fundamental condition to connect. But if communication is so important, why is it communication among teams, among groups, among organizations is often so messy, frustrating, and confusing? Why is it hard to find effective communication at work? Well, there are a few factors for that. People are just sometimes afraid to say what they really mean. They might, believe they're not part of a safe environment. People are sometimes disconnected from their feelings. They don't know why they feel what they feel. Feelings oftentimes are hard to be put into words, hard to articulate. People sometimes just listen to what they want to listen. They filter out things as a coping or as self-protection mechanism. People sometimes are just busy thinking about the next remark, what they're going to say next, instead of paying attention and actually listening to what they're hearing. So there are so many factors that prevent great communication at work. Boredom, stress, noise, conflicts, politics. Sometimes it's just not on a good day, to pay attention and to, exercise great communication. But again, great communication is an act of training and practice, and having a strategy sometimes help, right? You have to communicate and condition yourself to adopt a positive posture and think about the things you're going to say and how you're going to communicate and express yourself in advance, right? You have to have some sort of emotional control to the way you behave, to how you're going to impact other people through your words, through your gestures, through your body language. So communication is critical. You have to put a lot of effort into great communication, and once you start doing it and practicing and seeing what actually works, then things become second nature. A lot of the behaviors and practices are gonna come up sort of automatically with time. But nonetheless, it takes preparation, it takes focus, it takes dedication, it takes commitment. So how do you avoid the classic pitfalls for effective communication? At this point, you kind of realize it has to do with listening more, right? But there's a term for that that's called active listening. So to become a great communicator, the kind of communicator that informs, connects, and persuades, you have to become skillful on active listening. Typically at work, we spend 70 to 80% of our times communicating. And as mentioned, 48% of that time is on listening activities. But listening, it's a complex task. Listening can be done at about 4 times the rate of speaking. The typical person on average can absorb about 600 words per minute of listening and only 200 words speaking. So it's tricky, it's challenging. You have to really be paying attention to capture everything you can through active listening. And that's always the stress and the boredom, the corporate environments of noise, and so many other factors competing for your attention. But again, active listening is what differentiates great communicators from average communicators. It's one of the aspects of emotional intelligence when we talked about building empathy and social skills, how important that is to craft great relationships at work. So here's some of the things that the active listener or the effective communicator does that the average person does not. An active listener and great communicator acknowledges the speaker. It embraces, it increases the self-confidence of that person, the self-esteem. A great communicator or an active listener, he communicates with his body language, always saying, look, you're important, I respect you. So in the process of using active listening and communicating with empathy and respect, a great communicator reduces tension and stress, builds better teamwork, gains more trust, and simply gets access to higher quality information in general. So some of the factors that prevent most people from becoming great communicators is that they're just not trained to listen. From an early age, we're all conditioned to speak out, to have form opinions about things, to constantly measure, analyze, and judge, to carry mental models and preconceived notions about stuff. But in reality, listening, it's more important than that. So some of the tactics you can actually adopt to become a better communicator include: maintain steady eye contact, keep your posture alert, no yawning, no rolling eyes, no slacking. Paraphrase, stop here and there to make sure you're getting the message right. Be patient, don't interrupt, listen thoroughly before you contradict. Ask open-ended questions that can actually expand on the conversation. So some of the affirming responses you can actually use to motivate people to engage with you. I see, I understand. That's a good point. I can see where you're coming from. Tell me more. That's interesting. Then, what happened? Please continue. Help me understand better. Say more about that. Now contrast this approach with the approach of the worst listeners. Check this out. Bad listeners, they always interrupt. Bad listeners don't look at the other people. They jump into conclusions. They finish sentences. They change the subject in the middle. They write everything down like a laundry list. They're impatient. They lose their temper. So maybe you want to get to the next level of your career, increase your earning potential, get a better job, get a promotion, and deep down you know that effective communication is one of the keys that's going to get you there. So here's the final checklist to make sure you're on track for effective communication and active listening. Ask yourself, when people talk to me, do I listen to understand, or do I actually spend time preparing my next remark? Before agreeing or disagreeing, do I actually listen to what the other person or the other group is saying, or do I jump into conclusions? On a typical conversation, how many times do I actually try to summarize points of agreement or disagreement? Or more, on a typical conversation, how many times do I ask open-ended questions instead of the typical yes or no type of questions? When I make harsh remarks or comments or whatever it can be perceived as edgy, Do I respond in a way that shows sensitivity and respect for the other person? Reflect upon these common barriers for active listening and think about a recent situation where you maybe failed to demonstrate some of the skills of great communicators. As a takeaway, jot down 3 actions you can take to improve communication on your next interactions at work. Thanks so much for watching. I really hope you can practice on those tactics for effective communication. If you haven't yet, please subscribe to MBA Bites for exclusive insights on money, business, career. MBA Bites is a series about things you learn in business school and things you don't. I am Vin Bittencourt and I see you next time.